I was really excited to see the four former mayors of Vancouver come forward with the Stop the Violence group here in British Columbia. So that's definitely, I see that gives now, like Greg Robertson, he was able to come out and say this. It would almost look kind of strange if he didn't fall on that side because he's
Right.
known as a progressive.
Right.
So I guess that in a way definitely helps the current politicians, those kinds of
Absolutely.
activities,
No,
right?
that's very, very helpful when, especially when sitting mayors. And I think mayors can say a lot more because a lot of these drug discussions do happen at a more local level.
Yeah.
And I think mayors can show some leadership, as we saw around the Four Pillars and Vancouver's drug policy. The mayors had a lot to do with moving that forward. So I think mayors, if we could find some more mayors to have this kind of discussion, I think it would help.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the four pillars and a little bit about your history here in Vancouver and working with the city. So, I mean, you have an extensive knowledge of this topic. You've worked right within government, so you've seen for the front lines of how this works. Maybe just a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Well, I used to work at the Carnegie Center at the corner of Main and Hastings, and I went up to City Hall to work on drug policy because I was just so outraged by the number of people who were dying and dropping dead and getting HIV and Hep C, and there was so little response all through the 90s. And anyone who was around here in the 90s, they saw a total public policy, public health disaster take place in the city that was commonly voted the #1 city in the world. So we
Right.
had these two weird things going on. Yes, Vancouver's #1, and yet we have this horrible situation going on right in the middle of Vancouver. So I went up to City Hall to try and I was inspired by European cities who took a lot of leadership on these, cities like Amsterdam, cities like Zurich, Frankfurt, Hamburg, that took really strong leadership on trying to address local drug problems and real drug problems like people dying and HIV epidemics and that sort of stuff. Um, so my whole thing was try and support leadership at the city level and become, a leader in the bureaucracy, but also not, my sense was nothing really would happen until a politician really grabbed it. And that's, when Philip Owen started to move forward and be passionate about the four pillars and then Larry Campbell and Sam and Gregor, that was really success in the sense that we had a group of politicians leading the charge. And that's like gold when you're an activist, eh? It's like gold when the politicians actually they see they can actually, this is a winning issue. It's not a toxic issue politically. It's an issue that the public wants you to take forward.
Yes.
And that's what we saw happen in Vancouver. And the community was very supportive, and it was a lot of work by a lot of people in the downtown east side and other places. So I did that work for a while, and it was very gratifying. And I think we've moved the dial a bit here in Vancouver. It's there's lots of problems, lots of ways to go. And then I felt like, okay, the structural problem of drug prohibition and criminalization of drugs, that's got to be tackled at a national level,
Yeah.
and no one's doing that. So a group of us decided we would come together and chart a path forward, and that's what we're just starting to do now. You were at our launch, which was a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And this paper from the health officers, I think it's a discussion paper. They want feedback on it. We're gonna take it across the country as part of what we do, and we're gonna help them get feedback so they can revise it and then send it into all levels of government. About a year from now.
So maybe just for those who don't know, explain the four pillars.
The four pillars, it's a framework, we call it Framework for Action, the four pillars approach to drug problems in Vancouver. And we developed it in the year 2000, came out in 2000, late 2000. And we sort of wanted to put forward a comprehensive plan, what we felt was a comprehensive plan. And it wasn't just a health plan, but it included the police. The police are engaged in this business, whether they like it or not. So we put out, a plan that talked about, if we had to really make a lot of progress, what would we need? Well, we'd need a strong prevention pillar. We need a strong access to treatment pillar. We need a very good harm reduction pillar. And we also need the police to be doing enforcement in the best way that met the needs of the community. So we developed that plan to respond, I would say, more to the death and despair at the street level at that time. We didn't have a lot of cannabis in there. We chose to focus more on the overdose deaths epidemic, the HIV epidemic, the sort of open drug scenes in the streets. So it was a plan that tried to respond to the situation in Vancouver at the time.
Right. Yeah, and successfully, obviously, because things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah, things have changed, and I think people it was a good branding. People could understand it. It wasn't a sort of just a health plan. The police had to come to the table and be part of it, which was, I think, helpful in various parts of the plan. So, we got official police support for the injection site project and those sorts of things. And yeah, I think we need to take it to the next step. I think the problem with the four pillars is that it was a plan. The city didn't have total jurisdiction, so the city couldn't implement the whole thing, and we sort of stalled out, And so we have one injection site, we probably need 3 or 4. We have, this amount of supportive housing, we obviously need more. So the trick is with these things is to keep the train rolling until you've actually addressed a bigger part of the problem.
And that position, you worked for 12 years as the drug policy coordinator. That was the only position like that in the country, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And so how did that come about? How did you actually start working with the city directly, and how did they create that? Was that created for you at the time?
I wrote the report that created it, and it was on the advice of several of the European experts we brought in to meet with the mayor and city councillors, and the Europeans had been through a very similar situation like 10 years before us. And they said, look, you have to dedicate some resources to this planning process, because the cities, at the end of the day, the public phones their city councilors or their mayor. They don't phone the provincial minister of health or the federal minister of health. They phone the city guys. So at the end of every day, the city guys hear about the problem. So they said, look, the city has to invest some resources into helping formulate a plan.
Yeah. So how come in 2009 you decided to step down? I know you said, I think I have an article here where you were saying about taking it nationally and moving those things forward. Was that the reason that you wanted to?
Yeah, I really felt the age I was that I had one more major sort of project to do, and I thought, okay, why not? Because we've been talking about it for several years.
Right.
We kept saying, well, we need a national group. We need a national, and no one was sort of emerging to do that work. So I said, well, I'll take a year off and I'll sort of travel a bit, check out the global drug policy scene, and then come back and start in earnest to work with a group of Canadians to create this organization.
Oh, fantastic. So where do we go next then? So you guys have more actions planned, or those community sort of meetups, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we're going to, well, we don't have the specific action plan yet, but that's our next step is to strategize what does 2012 look like. Where do we want to do public dialogues? What policy pieces do we want to produce some papers on, that sort of thing, and chart out a work plan for 2012.
Very cool. So for people that are watching that want to become involved in some way with your group, how do they do that? Or is there room for people to sign up as members? That kind
Absolutely.
of stuff?
Go to our website, Canadian Drug Policy Coalition, www.drugpolicy.ca. And check out our website. You can sign up as a supporter, you can sign up as a member, you can sign up as an organizational member. We don't demand a lot of you, but obviously we want to work with people who have some energy and want to help out, because it's a massive task we're taking on.
I'm kidding. Are there any fees for people who want to sign up?
No,
no,
not now.
Not now.
We don't know. We need a revenue source, and that was one potential one. But in the beginning, we didn't want to put any barriers to.
Right.
We want to build. This year, we want to focus on building a broad coalition. So as I said, and I emphasize the word broad. We don't want 6 months from now the same 30 activists sitting in a room plotting away. We want new people to get the message, and we want to build on the resources of other organizations that. They may not be drug policy organizations, but it's an issue that really affects them.
Right.
Like the schools, school districts, other public health groups that focus very broadly, and maybe drug policy is just a small part of what they do. We want them to be involved too, because we can carry the heavier weight and the drug policy focus. So So I'll be talking to lots of people, meeting with lots of people over the next year, this is a coalition building year. So, and then in year two, we'll start looking at, well, how do we develop a new drug policy for Canada? What would that take? Who do we need involved? How much would that cost? And start that process.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Donald. I really appreciate having you on, and we'll be talking to you again for sure. We'll have you back if you feel like coming back on again for sure.
Okay.
Thanks a
Pleasure.
lot. Yeah,
okay.
And check out their website, drugpolicy.ca.
Yep.
It's the URL. Donald.